the channel. I'm back to break down this 11-game NBA DFS slate on DraftKings and FanDuel. Excited to get into this one. First big slate of the year. Before we do, a quick reminder that if you do enjoy the content at any point in this video, if you could please take a moment to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future content that I upload. That would be greatly appreciated. And if you are getting very serious about NBA DFS, really looking to play all season long and really win some money, I would highly recommend my NBA DFS premium package. That's linked below in the description. You get access to all of my projections, my core plays, all of that fun stuff. You'll see all the description when you visit the link. So with that being said, let's go and start breaking down this slate today. Don't forget to stay tuned to the end of the video for my lock of the day. And don't forget to sign up on PrizePicks using promo code KJK DFS to receive a match up to $100 if you're doing PrizePicks tonight based off the stuff we go over, which I would highly recommend. Great format over there. First game on the slate today, we have Indiana taking on Charlotte. As far as injury news in this one, we have Karis LeVert already listed as out, Brogdon questionable, Rozier questionable, and Bridges questionable. More so probable for most of these guys is my assumption. Brogdon probable, Rozier probable, and then as far as Mr. Miles Bridges, he's also probable. So I wouldn't be worrying about those guys all too much. We know TJ Warren's out. Jeremy Lamb also with a questionable tag here. He's actually questionable, so maybe something to keep an eye on for sure. But as far as the total pace in this game and everything and how it's expected to go, this game comes with a 223.5 over under. 2-point spread in favor of the Charlotte Hornets. And, you know, decent pace game, not the craziest in the world. But when we go ahead and break down usage, I would say it's pretty clear to know exactly where the ball is going with both of these teams, which never hurts our feelings at all. As far as the full breakdown here, I mean, looking at the Hornets side of the ball, it's really going to be going to LaMelo Ball, Terry Rozier, Gordon Hayward. PJ Washington, I mean, Mason Plumlee also a great addition there. But it's pretty clear cut as to, you know, where these minutes are going as far as off the bench as well. Miles Bridges, Kelly Oubre, Ish Smith, really going to be the ones that we're really wanting to focus in on there. And then on the Indiana side of things, Malcolm Brogdon, Domantas Sabonis are going to have some really big workloads here. And then Torrey Craig, the expected starter, also very cheap price tag over on DraftKings. Like, as we mentioned, Jeremy Lamb off the bench could be questionable. So, yeah, breaks out pretty obvious as to who I'd be targeting this one. As far as on the Indiana side, it's going to be Malcolm Brogdon. And then on LaMelo Ball as far as the point guard. So both sides there, like both those guys, if you're going to this game. And then, of course, Mr. Domantas Sabonis, absolute fantasy point beast last year, putting up 1.29 FanDuel points per minute as far as FanDuel's as far as FanDuel's concerned, and as far as DK is concerned, Domantas Sabonis putting up 1.36 DK points per minute. So the guy's an absolute beast if you're going to this game. Like I said, I expect him and Brogdon to carry a lot of the load here. So no issues with those guys. And then we talked about Bridges, Rozier, and then Gordon Hayward. If you're targeting these guys on the Hornet side, you really can't play all of them because they can't all get there. But these are the guys you're really looking to. So no issues with those guys. Kelly Oubre Jr. also off the bench, I think is a very interesting option. I expect him to get a lot of usage when he comes off the bench, and that's always friendly for our fantasy lineups. So I like those guys in that one. Chicago taking on Detroit as far as the total in this one. This game comes in right now with a 218.5 over under. Not exactly the fastest paced game in the world at all, with a 5-point spread in favor of the Chicago Bulls here. And for that reason, you know, my interest is going to be a little bit limited whenever the pace is that slow. I'm not going to get all that excited about it. Lonzo Ball, the new addition on the Chicago Bulls, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, they're going to kind of split it on the Chicago Bulls side, taking a look at the new roster. And then as far as the Pistons side, Killian Hayes, Sadiq Bey, Jeremiah Grant, Isaiah Stewart actually could be supplying us with some pretty decent fantasy value over there on the Pistons side. This one, like I said, unfortunately not exactly the fastest paced game in the world. But with that being said, it's the beginning of the season, and we can find some underpriced guys. Vucevic, LaVine, both priced up pretty good here as to their roles, but we do have a pretty decent discount on DeMar DeRozan at 7-1. You know, where he files into this team is going to be determined, but I tend to think, you know, it's going to be pretty obvious. The usage is going to be going through Vucevic, LaVine, and DeMar DeRozan. And DeMar DeRozan definitely priced the friendliest of the three on DraftKings here. Along with Lonzo Ball, though. I mean, Lonzo Ball is priced at only 6'9" as well, so both those guys friendly price tags. And then on the Detroit side, like I said, this isn't the fastest-paced game in the world, so I wouldn't get crazy with it as far as the number of guys you target, but you could definitely target a couple. And Sadiq Bey, one of those guys that we definitely like targeting on the Detroit side at 6'4", good DK point per minute producer. No issues with going to him. And Isaiah Stewart also can really beast and feast as far as the point per minute guy. And he's expected to get a pretty good run. I like him. And then, of course, you have Hayes at the point guard position at only 5'5". And those are the guys you could be locking in on the Detroit side. Like I said, not the fastest pace in the game in the world, so not exactly the most interest. But we have Boston taking on the New York Knicks as the next game here. As far as the total in this game comes with a 217.5 over/under, 2-point spread in favor of the New York Knicks. And, once again, not a very fast-paced game. Compared to some of the other games on the slate, I'm not getting too excited. Jaylen Brown is listed as questionable. With the COVID-19 protocols, he might miss. If he does miss, of course, that's pretty significant as to the usage on this team. That would be big bumps to guys like Marcus Smart, Jason Tatum, even a Dennis Schroeder, a Peyton Pritchard off the bench, Josh Richardson as well, if you take out that guard. So keep an eye on that. We have Romeo Langford expected to start. And, once again, a team that's pretty predictable here as far as where the ball goes. Jason Tatum, Kemba Walker now on the New York Knicks, so we don't have to worry about him feeding into the usage of the Boston Celtics team. But we have Jaylen Brown, who, like I said, if he's out, of course, that's going to bump up Marcus Smart, Dennis Schroeder. So keep an eye on that one as far as the Boston side is concerned. But those guys are really what I'm looking to lock in on. And then Robert Williams at 5'1". I like Robert Williams a lot, especially on FanDuel a lot of times, because this guy just gets so many blocks and he's so active. So at his price tag, I wouldn't hate targeting some Robert Williams in tournaments whatsoever. And then on the Knicks side, I would say the usage is going to get a little bit more condensed now. Spread out. We have Kemba Walker, Evan Fournier, RJ Barrett, Julius Randle. All four of those guys, I think, are going to be kind of battling for usage here. And it's not the best matchup taking on a Boston team that's pretty good defensively. So, and then not to mention the pace isn't the greatest. So I'm not having nearly as much interest in there. And like I said, the Boston side, if Brown misses, that's going to make us have a lot more interest in those other guys. But as far as the Knicks side, Julius Randle's priced appropriately. Derrick Rose 6'9", Kemba Walker 6'7" would probably be my favorite of the bunch. Based on his price tag and upside, I think that's too cheap on DraftKings. You could definitely be targeting him. RJ Barrett at 5'7" as well. They're kind of the two cheap guys, and then Mitch Robinson. Don't get me wrong. Julius Randle was an absolute beast last year on a per point basis. Per minute. Pulling up the DK projections here as far as what I had him grading out for DK points per minute last year. We can see that Julius Randle came in producing 1.29 DK points per minute. So, doesn't get much better than that. The problem is the pace and the fact that now there's even more hands to feed in that offense. So I kind of think I like sticking to the mid-range of Evan Fournier, Kemba Walker, and RJ Barrett. I'll do a rerun of my projections, but first look here, that'd be kind of where I'm looking to in this game. And then, of course, Mitch Robinson as well. I think it's priced pretty decently if you want to go to him. Save some salary. He also has a bunch of upside alongside Mr. Robert Williams that we discussed as well. So, like those guys. Washington taking on Toronto here. Bradley Beal listed as questionable. We already have Pascal Siakam ruled as out. Chris Boucher is listed as questionable as far as the latest on that. He is a true questionable, so we'll have to keep an eye on the news as far as that's concerned. That could, of course, impact the starting lineup here. But overall, taking a glimpse at this matchup, what's expected to go down here at 9-5. Bradley Beal, like we said, expected to play. And this game has a 219.5 over under 2.5 point spread in favor of the Toronto Raptors. And, not exactly the fastest paced game in the world once again, but when we're breaking down the usage, which is always important, and how these rosters fold out, you can see for Washington, they now have Spencer Dinwiddie, Bradley Beal, KCP, Kyle Kuzma, Daniel Gafford. So I think that offense will be pretty predictable. Montrezl Harrell off the bench at 3.7. I think it'd be a great play on DraftKings. But Dinwiddie, Beal, Kuzma are really going to be the big three there, and then Gafford at the center position. Davis Bertans off the bench can really shoot the three ball, so no issues there. And then as far as the Raptors and how they're breaking down this year, Goran Dragic, Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, Scotty Barnes, and Precious Achiuwa. As far as there being no Pascal Siakam, Achiuwa could be a great play there. Gary Trent Jr. and Svi Mikhailiuk off the bench on DraftKings specifically would be the ones that I'm looking to there. So, but by far, Fred VanVleet and OJ Anunoby, I'd expect them to run this offense. Goran Dragic also priced at a friendly price tag, and then when you're factoring that they're taking on this Washington defense that was absolutely dreadful last year, I definitely have some interest in some Toronto guys, and like I said, I think it's pretty easy as to know where you're going. It all starts with Anunoby and Van Vliet, and then as far as the rest of the guys, you have Dragic, Kyle Kuzma, Gary Trent Jr. Off the bench for the Toronto side, it's Trent Jr. and Dragic. Kyle Kuzma, I already discussed that his friendly price tag on Washington, I think, is one you could be looking to, and really kind of price tag hunting in this one. The ones that are priced up, not going to have as much interest. Bradley Beal, could he get there for you? Sure, but the game's not exactly the fastest paced game, and he's actually priced up. I'd rather go down to some of these cheaper guys that we're talking about here, like Kuzma, Trent Jr., OG Anunoby, Fred VanVleet, Dragic, Dinwiddie, etc. Cleveland taking on Memphis. Next game on the schedule here. Ja Morant comes in at 9-1. This game, as far as its total expected pace and all that fun stuff, currently has a 216.5 over-under here with a 7.5 point spread in favor of the Memphis Grizzlies. And once again, slow-paced game. It's even expected to not really stay close, with Memphis expected to win this one pretty easily. And with that being said, I guess the only thing you could maybe make an argument for is that the Grizzlies side, the usage could be pretty condensed, and the guys that are really pushing this team to go ahead really go off here. Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Kyle Anderson, Jaren Jackson Jr., Steven Adams. I think the usage would be pretty predictable over there. You're mainly looking at Ja Morant, Steven Adams in the pick and roll. Kyle Anderson, pretty good fantasy point per minute user. Desmond Bane, not bad at all, especially that 3-2 price tag on DraftKings. At the Cleveland side, Darius Garland, Colin Sexton, Okoro, Mobley, Jared Allen. Pretty clear cut again. We have Ricky Rubio, Lauri Markkanen, Chetty Osman, Kevin Love come off the bench expected. So it's going to be Garland, Sexton, Jared Allen, that are really the top producers in the starting lineup. And I think Jared Allen's price is pretty friendly at 6.5 on DraftKings specifically. And then Darius Garland at 7.6 as well. Could be an interesting guy that you're looking to in this game based on the price tags I'm looking at. I mean, Colin Sexton's an absolute beast on a point per minute basis last year. He really got the job done at 8.3, so don't get me wrong, I have interest in him as far as his point per minute production on DraftKings. You're looking at about 1.04 DK points per minute. It's just he's a little bit more appropriately priced compared to these other guys, and when we're not a fast-paced game, you kind of need the price tag to be not so appropriate. Ja Morant at 9.1, though. He's priced up a little bit much, but I think that his usage will be through the roof this year for Memphis, so I like him for sure. From a price tag aspect, my favorite guy on the Grizzlies side of things, probably, I don't know, you have Tillman off the bench, Tyus Jones, Anthony Melton as well, so those guys could also be interesting bench options. But from the starting position, there's no Dylan Brooks, so I'd expect Kyle Anderson to get a little bit of a bump here, and he's only 5'4". He'd probably be my favorite one based upon his price tag. Houston taking on Minnesota, the next game up here on the schedule. Karl-Anthony Towns, D'Angelo Russell expected to be back together here. John Wall has already been listed as out. As far as the total in this one, this game comes in with a 229.5 over-under with a 5.5 point spread in favor of the Minnesota Timberwolves. And this is a game where the pace is actually going to be good here. A 229.5 over-under, one of the best ones we've talked about so far. We know exactly where the ball is going on both sides, so the usage is pretty condensed, which is exactly what you're looking for when you're targeting guys. On the Houston Rockets, Kevin Porter Jr. at the top, going to be a great play. Jalen Green, Jayshawn Tate, Christian Wood, absolute beast, Daniel Tice, Eric Gordon. So my favorite is going to be Kevin Porter at the point guard position for sure. I do think that Jayshawn Tate's a decent play in the mid-range at 5'8". Daniel Tice at 5'3", a great fantasy point per minute producer as well. I have no issues playing him. And Christian Wood's a beast. He's 8K, but against a Minnesota Timberwolves team that's just really not that good defensively, I have no issues with that whatsoever. And then on the Timberwolves side, D'Angelo Russell, Karl-Anthony Towns lead the way. Anthony Edwards and Malik Beasley, kind of the secondary guys. Malik Beasley at 5'3", I think is by far the most intriguing based upon his price tag. I think his upside could really top that in a pretty big way. It's not going to help his case having D'Angelo Russell back, Karl-Anthony Towns back. A lot of times when these guys are injured, guys like that will step up to get even more usage than you would typically anticipate for the season. But regardless, definitely like him. And I mean, Karl-Anthony Towns on a permanent basis is absolutely ridiculous. It's expected to stay close here at 9.7. I like him. I like D'Angelo Russell. I think it's very clear cut that those guys are going to dominate the ball, the usage on this side, and that makes it exciting to want to target them. So I like those guys. Like Daniel Tice down here at 5'3" on the Houston side. I always like Porter. I mean, the guy's just an absolute beast as far as at 7'8". With there being no John Wall in this one, he should get even more on-ball usage. And I'm not too worried about the defense of D'Angelo Russell, so he'd be my favorite option there. Moving further along here, Philadelphia taking on the New Orleans Pelicans. 10-6 is Joel Embiid. Zion Williamson is listed as out. Ben Simmons is listed as out. So we've already gotten that news. As far as the total in this one, it's a 225.5 over under. 3-point spread in favor of the Philadelphia 76ers. And once again, we do have some injuries that are going to, increase some usage here. No Zion Williamson. That should definitely make Brandon Ingram one of the best plays here. Devontae Graham at 5'7". Love those guys. Jonas Valanciunas should get a plenty of usage. Nickeil Alexander-Walker off the bench. Josh Hart off the bench. With there being no Zion, those guys are going to get some bumps, and I like them for sure. I think they're going to be a little bit underpriced in the early going here. And then on the Sixers side, we have Tyrese Maxey, Seth Curry at 5'8", who really shoot the ball. Danny Green, Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid. With there being no Simmons, I'd expect Tobias Harris and Joel Embiid to be used to the roof, and I really like Andre Drummond at 5'2". Off the bench on both sides, he's grading out to be a tremendous play as well. It's still to be determined how, of course, all these teams are using their players, but I think Andre Drummond's just way too cheap at his respective price tags on both sides. And like I said, Joel Embiid and Tobias Harris, both tremendous plays here. I think their usage is going to be through the roof. And then on the Pelican side, Brandon Ingram and Jonas Valanciunas, both going to be tremendous plays here. The guys that are priced up in this game, I think, are still underpriced. 7-7 for Brandon Ingram, who's expected to really dominate here. And then Devontae Graham at 5'7". I think he's way too cheap here. Expected to have one of the biggest roles he's had since joining the league, and a guy that we could see really produce some fantasy points at times in his career. And like I said, off the bench for the Pelicans, I think with there being no Zion, guys like Josh Hart and Andre Drummond could really shine here for Philadelphia. But Josh Hart, and I also talked about playing Mr. Nickeil Alexander-Walker as well. Those guys make some sense to me, and that's what I'd be looking to in that game. Moving further along here, Orlando against the San Antonio Spurs. DeJounte Murray priced up to 6'8" in this one as far as the anticipated pace and everything. This game's priced very cheap. The fact that he's the most expensive guy in this game is kind of says something. This game has a 212.5 over-under with a 6-point spread in favor of the San Antonio Spurs. Terrible game environment. Only a 212.5 over-under. That's not going to get me excited whatsoever. The only thing I would say is we just have to look at usage. Mo Bamba is expected to be a starter now for the Magic, which is going to go a long way. He's a great fantasy point per minute producer, so maybe jumping on his price tag on the early going. Same thing for Wendell Carter Jr., Gary Harris at 4'4". So those guys are underpriced on DraftKings, so maybe looking to them. Terrence Ross at the bench is a 6-man. RJ Hampton expected to have an expanded role. So even though it's a slow-paced game, with them being low-priced, could be going there. And then on the Spurs side, things are a little bit less interesting. Keldon Johnson, Derek White, DeJounte Murray, I think the usage should be pretty spread out between them. And I think they'll trade spots having big games, but it's like who's going to have that big game, it's kind of tough to say. On the Orlando side, I think Wendell Carter Jr., Mo Bamba, these guys could be interesting for sure here. And RJ Hampton off the bench, like guys that didn't have the rules that they're expected to have here now, could go a long way. Mo Bamba, RJ Hampton, they didn't have the opportunity to play as many minutes as they will this season, so maybe jumping on them early would make some sense to me. Oklahoma City taking on Utah. Donovan Mitchell 9-6. This game comes in with a 222 over-under with a 12-point spread in favor of the Utah Jazz. This game's not expected to stay close whatsoever. And that can be a little bit concerning considering it's such a large slate. If this game turns into a blowout and you don't get the full run from your starters, that's, of course, not going to be fun. On the Oklahoma City side, it's pretty clear Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going to dominate the usage, so he'll be my favorite. Lou Dort at 6K, pretty decent mid-range play as well. Derek Favors cheap. Isaiah Roby off the bench. No issues with you going to those guys. And then on the Utah side, more spread out as far as usage. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander really dominant as far as their side. Don't get me wrong, the Utah Jazz do have some dominant guys in the sense of Donovan Mitchell, Mike Conley, who can really dominate on-ball handling. But it's going to be a little bit more spread out thin here. And my favorite option on their side, based on his price tag, would be Mike Conley at 6'2" at the point guard position. Jordan Clarkson, Joe Ingles off the bench, Hassan White's off the bench. All three of those guys, no issues with going to them either. And that's how this one's going to shake out. Honestly, with it being such a slow-paced game and not expected to stay close, Donovan Mitchell, I just have a hard time really wanting to play him on this slate. With the game script, I'd much rather go to the cheaper guys at the bench, like a Jordan Clarkson, the cheaper guys in the starting lineup, like a Mike Conley. And then on the OKC side, it's really simple. If this game's going to stay close, I'm sure it's going to be on the back of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So he's going to be the top play over there that I'd really be looking to play in my fantasy lineups tonight. Denver taking on Phoenix. Nikola Jokic listed as questionable in this one. Michael Porter Jr. listed as questionable. Jamal Murray's already been ruled out as far as the latest update. For Michael Porter, he was out Thursday, and there hasn't been much of an update since. And as far as Nikola Jokic, he was also out Thursday. So just keep an eye on these guys. For now, we're going to talk about them as if they're in. And with there being no Jamal Murray, that's going to give a bit of a usage bump to a couple of guys here. Monte Morris, Will Barton, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, Nikola Jokic, though. That's a solid starting lineup and one that the usage is going to be really spread out thin at times. I mean, Nikola Jokic, obviously the top play. He's priced up for good reason, but he has plenty of shooters around him. The rest of the guys, honestly, they're probably going to take turns having big games. I'd say Michael Porter Jr. will be my favorite based on a per-minute basis and just his production. I think it's Michael Porter Jr. and Nikola Jokic's team for the most part. Both those guys really like it. And then Monte Morris, Will Barton, like I said, you could take more risks on. On the Sun side, it's a little more clear for me. It's Chris Paul, it's Devin Booker. I mean, McCall Bridges, Jay Crowder, DeAndre Ayton will fill in, but it's really those two guys and then DeAndre Ayton, the third guy, as far as the big games are concerned. So I do like Devin Booker and Chris Paul here at their respective price tags. DeAndre Ayton, with this game expected to stay close. Decent pace in the world. I mean, it's not the fastest paced game in the, on the slate, but a 223 total isn't exactly terrible. And like I said, we know the ball's going here. We know these guys are really going to dominate the usage. I mean, Devin Booker and Chris Paul, that's what this team's all about. That's what these guys run the ball through. And I like both those guys. And we saved the best for last here because Sacramento taking on Portland is going to be the highest total on the slate. It's 10-1 for Damian Lillard on DK. 232.5 over under here with a fast-paced game, a 5-point spread in favor of the Portland Trailblazers. This game will be a high priority for me. And then we're breaking down how these teams fare. Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, Norman Powell, Robert Covington, Yusuf Nurkic, Larry Nance, and Dennis Smith Jr. off the bench. Pretty clear cut as far as the Portland rotation, I would say. And then on the Sacramento side, De'Aaron Fox, Tyrese Halliburton, Harrison Barnes, Mo Harkless, Rashawn Holmes, Buddy Hield off the bench, Tristan Thompson, Terrence Davis. So yeah, I mean, Terrence Davis off the bench I think could be an interesting option on the Kings side. As far as the starting lineup, it's all going to run through De'Aaron Fox, so he's expected to have the big game. Rashawn Holmes, I'm going to like a lot at 6'3". I think that's just too cheap. On the Trailblazers side, it's all Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum. Norman Powell at 5'7", I think is a little underpriced. And then as far as from the most dominant usage aspect, I would say CJ McCollum's the most underpriced here at 7'2". And this just seems like a perfect CJ McCollum game. You need him in fast, up-tempo games where he can really shoot the three ball, especially in DraftKings. I think he's going to grade out as a great play tonight. And a lot of these guys, like De'Aaron Fox, Damian Lillard, you're going to love both of them. I mean, two of the top point guard plays in the slate in a fast, up-tempo game, head guys on their team. I'm going to have a hard time telling you not to have a lot of interest in both of these guys. I definitely do. And then I like CJ McCollum, as stated. Buddy Hield at 7K. If he comes off the bench, he might be lower owned, and maybe he could really go off, so that'll be interesting. Keep an eye on that one. I think I'd rather play Buddy Hield off the bench at 7K than Halliburton in the starting lineup. Don't get me wrong, that's close, but I'd rather get all that usage. And then Marvin Bagley and Rashawn Holmes as well. But he will not be included in the opener. Marvin Bagley will not. And I guess it's a little bit of a trade possibility stuff going on. So keep an eye on that as well. That'll be interesting to track throughout the season because that's going to obviously open up some more minutes for a guy like a Mo Harkless. Rashawn Holmes, more usage and upside as well. So that's something to take note of. Rashawn Holmes, with there being no Bagley, definitely more upside. And that is my overall breakdown here. Before I let you guys go, I got to give you my lock of the night. And before I do, I also just want to point out some discrepancies possibly on the two websites. I like to do that when we're going over this before I let you guys go. Just figure out if there's guys that stand out to me on one site over the other. Because I know we talk a lot about DraftKings throughout the video, but I also want to cover FanDuel for you guys. And FanDuel. So, as far as the biggest pricing guys, we talked about Andre Drummond. I think he's too cheap at 4.6. Terrence Ross at 4.4 for the Orlando Magic. I think it's a really good bargain over here on FanDuel. So he's one guy that I'd definitely be looking to. FanDuel now has multi-positional eligibility as well, so you can fit these guys in pretty easily. Malik Beasley, we talked about at 4.8 on FanDuel. I think it's an interesting play. Kyle Kuzma at 4.7, I think is an interesting play over here. Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan, I think, are pretty underpriced for FanDuel in comparison to DraftKings, so both of those guys could be interesting options. We talked about DeRozan on DraftKings, still underpriced on FanDuel. But like him. Over here on FanDuel, Dennis Schroeder for Boston. If there's going to be no Jaylen Brown, too, specifically at 5'7", I think it'd be a great play on FanDuel. And then Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at 7'6". Like we said, if this game's going to stay close, that's going to be on his back. So those are the guys that are really standing out to me in comparison. And then DK, obviously we went over it pretty good here, but as far as anyone that we missed, just grading out on my projections and everything from a first look aspect, I think we did pretty good. No one else really popping at the top too much here. Outside of maybe Enes Kanter on Boston at 3-4, I think he can maybe be a sneaky play off the bench over here on DraftKings. So, with all that being said, that's my overall breakdown. Before I let you guys go, I got to give you my lock of the night. Let's get into it. And my lock of the night tonight is going to be Kyle Kuzma taking on this Toronto Raptors squad tonight in a 2.5-point spread game, a game that's expected to stay close in his new role in Washington. I really expect him to have some big gains here, and I think he's too underpriced starting out here on both websites. DraftKings and FanDuel definitely have interest in him tonight with this role. Maybe people not adjusting quite as quickly to the fact that he's not on the Lakers anymore, and I think that with this being said, he can have some big games with a 0.91 DK point per minute production on DraftKings last year, and then as far as FanDuel, 0.86 FanDuel points per minute. I'd expect that to be able to climb with the new role as mentioned. Love this spot for Kyle Kuzma. Get him in your lineups because he is my lock of the night. So there you have it, guys. Kyle Kuzma, get him in your lineups. And that is all from me in this one. If you do enjoy the content, if you could please take a moment to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. That would be greatly appreciated. Wish you guys all the best of luck tonight, and we will see you in the next one.